This is Charity Rowland with some guidance on scoring the communication matrix assessment. To be honest, I'm not a proponent of assigning a numerical value to matrix results. I created the matrix to provide a functional picture, and I emphasize picture, of how a child communicates, and that's exemplified in the one-page profile. That's the major output of any matrix assessment. But I do understand that sometimes you need to generate a score for the matrix. Scores may be useful to quantify progress from one administration of an assessment to another, or they may be a requirement of your school district. There are 4 ways we use to score the matrix. The simplest score is the total score. There are 80 cells on the matrix profile. Each cell may be scored according to its level of mastery, either not used, a blank cell, which gets a score of 0, emerging, which gets a score of 1 point, and mastered or surpassed, which gets scores of 2 points each. You add up those points to get the total score, which is going to range anywhere from 0 to 160, or you may take a percentage of the total score out of 160. So if you got a total of 80 points, that would be 50% of 160. One total score by itself doesn't tell you anything about exactly what the individual is doing to communicate. You just know that the higher the score is, the better. And you would never want to use this score to compare one individual with another. But this score is very sensitive to change over time, since it will increase whenever a cell moves up from not used to emerging or from emerging to mastered. So it's a very good way to measure progress. In this profile, you can see that 17 cells were scored mastered or surpassed at levels 1 and 2 for a total of 34 points, and 4 cells were scored emerging for a total of 4 points. So the total score for this profile is 38, or 24% of 160. A second way to score the matrix is to identify the primary level at which the individual is operating. You can take several approaches to this. The primary level may be the level at which the highest percentage of cells are scored as mastered. Or you could be more liberal with this approach and count both emerging and mastered cells. Another way to interpret primary level would be to designate the level at which the individual communicates most frequently, which may yield a different and perhaps more important result. Looking at the same profile, we see that 5 out of 8 cells, or 63% of cells, are mastered or emerging at level 3. At level 4, 5 out of 1, or 36%, are scored mastered or emerging. At level 5, 4 out of 17, or 24%. So the primary level would be 3, which has the highest percentage of cells mastered or emerging at 63%. But perhaps this individual has severe physical challenges and has great difficulty making gestures, so they just don't occur very often. And perhaps he's just gotten a communication device with picture symbols on it that he's learning to use, and he's using that system frequently because it's physically easy to do so. Perhaps you would characterize his primary level as level 5, even though these behaviors are still emerging, just because he's rapidly adopting this as his most frequent mode of communication. You can also look at the highest level mastered, perhaps in combination with the primary level. Most individuals operate on several levels at the same time, using some behaviors at a higher level than the primary level. In this same example, we see that the highest level with any mastered cells is level 4. But if we count emerging behaviors also, the highest level would be level 5. Finally, there's a more complicated way to score that provides more useful information. We call this the reason intent score. It shows what percent of cells are scored mastered, surpassed, or emerging for each of the 4 major reasons to communicate: to refuse, which has 7 cells, to obtain, which has 31 cells, for social interaction, which has 28 cells, and for information, which has 14 cells. For instance, the score above shows an individual who has a reason intent score of 100, 60, 35, 0. So she has a 100% score for refusing and a healthy 60% for obtaining. However, social interaction is only at 35%, and this individual has no means at all of exchanging information. So this pattern gives you a general idea of the sorts of things that this child can express. Once again, we look at the same profile and we see that for refusing, the leftmost column of the profile, 5 out of 7 cells are scored mastered, surpassed, or emerging for a score of 71%. For obtaining, 13 out of 31 cells, or 41%, are scored mastered, surpassed, or emerging. For social, we have 3 out of 28, or 11%, and for information, we have none, for 0%. So the reason intent score for this profile is 71, 42, 11, 0. Visit our Community of Practice website for further information about using the Communication Matrix assessment.